Let's explore effective techniques to enhance intuition. This evening's lesson is drawn from a good-hearted question found on Reddit. Could meditation help me find the truth? The individual wrote, I am a Shia Muslim and I am struggling with finding truth within my religion. So this is not an invitation for proselytization at all. I am sure Islam, but I got lost between the different denominations and ideas. So can meditation make me find the right one? Yes. Yes, it can. So what I'd like to do tonight is tailor this evening's lesson 100% to the individual, the Muslim who asked the question. Now, could this be applied to people who are secular? Yes, it could. Could this be applied to atheists? Yes, it could. Could this be adapted to any religion? Yes, it could. But I'm tailoring this lesson for the Muslim individual. I want this individual to feel safe and that they can ask questions without receiving any type of coercion. So what I propose to you is a twice daily practice that you can perform last thing in the evening before you go to bed and first thing in the morning. If you do this for a week or a month or 3 months, you will see dynamic results. Consistency counts. There's an old saying that's universally observed, that drop by drop, even the largest vase is eventually filled. So, at first, open your practice by bowing thrice to Allah. Then recite one subah of Subhanallah, or whichever praise speaks to you the most. The next step is to coordinate your prefrontal cortex with your autonomic nervous system. And this is where things get exciting. So I'd like to give you some background and then we'll dive into the neuroscience. So it's 3 steps: background, neuroscience, specifics. Here we go. Sturgeon's law reminds us that 90% of everything sucks. What could that look like? Well, it looks like the majority of humanity, regardless of culture, regardless of gender, are prone to being rigid, fearful, superstitious, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and cruel. But throughout each sector of humanity, there's always going to be at least some humans who are enthusiastic to be flexible, loving, rational, laid back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. So I would remind the individual who wrote that if they look at the history of Islam, there have been all types of humans who are Islam. People from different cultures, people who spoke different languages, people of different genders, people of different temperaments. There have been people who were rigid, fearful, superstitious, and controlling, and there were people who were flexible, loving, rational, laid back. There was a time, if I get the city wrong, please forgive me, but there was a time at the height of Islamic civilization where Baghdad was the center of the arts and sciences for the whole world. And anybody who had mastered their field, their speciality, was welcome there, regardless of their religion. There was a time when, at the height of Baghdad, at the height of Islamic civilization, where they were the bastion of science. They erected numerous, what's it called? Observatories. The majority of stars have Arabic names because of the great Islamic scientists. There was a time when the Islamic civilization not only preserved medicine but advanced it, and which was beautiful. It was a Muslim who invented algebra. It was the Muslims who invented what we call today Arabic numerals, which are much easier to work with than Roman numerals. Oh my goodness. So the impact of Islamic civilization upon the world is undeniable. But there was a time where there was a religious leader who came to power, who proclaimed that algebra was of Satan. And this individual was kind of reminds me of the European equivalent. There's always been someone like this somewhere. The Europeans at Thomas de Torquemada, and I forgot this guy's name. I apologize. I mean no disrespect. But this guy, like Thomas, was rigid, fearful, superstitious, and controlling. But there's always been a minority who are flexible, loving, rational, and laid back. So the creativity we desire to have great and helpful and insightful intuition that is not scattered spontaneity, but centered spontaneity, flows through this flexible, loving, rational, laid-back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind disposition. So our central nervous system has many, many components. When we use the right component for the right job, we naturally become flexible, loving, rational, laid-back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. When we use the wrong component for the wrong job, we become cranky and rigid, and we can't think straight, and the dog gets scared of us. So we want to be the person who the dog likes. So now let's look at neuroscience. Before I can tell you how to meditate, I have to tell you how not to meditate. 90% of everyone is a bonehead, including meditation teachers. And so there are meditation teachers who are rigid and controlling, and they will implore you to practice active concentration and active analysis. And the only way to do that is to utilize very specific areas of the brain, such as the medial prefrontal cortex or the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. Now, the prefrontal cortex is a lovely, lovely set of tools. If you want to compare or contrast or analyze or calculate or edit, this is perfect. But like anything, it can be overused. So when we overuse our prefrontal cortex, our amygdala, this lumpy thing down here that kind of looks like an almond, gets activated. And this is the seat of our aggression and our anxiety. This will feed our rigidity and our controlling tendencies and will undermine our intuition. But there's a solution. Let us begin with mindfulness. Every time we inhale, whether we know it or not, we access the sympathetic nervous system located in the center third of our spinal cord. This region has evolved to help us to perceive vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly. There are all sorts of things we can perceive. We can perceive sights, sounds, sensations, flavors, scents, and the like. We can also perceive emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, and imaginings. We can perceive whole spectrums of phenomena, from the external to the internal, from the physical to the mental, from the pleasurable to the painful, from the interesting to the boring, from the glorious to the grotesque. And we've all had moments of grotesquerie. There's a song in the early 70s when I was but a child, and the chorus was, "Everybody plays the fool." But here's some good news. When it comes to meditation, every time we exhale, whether we mean to or not, we access our parasympathetic nervous system, which is located in both the lower third as well as the upper third of that same spinal cord. They're neighbors. And so this parasympathetic nervous system has evolved to support both physical relaxation as well as mental release. Now, here is a legitimate question. You could say, well, hey, I've got a spinal cord. Why aren't I the Lord of all intuition? Why aren't I a great luminary? Why aren't I a great holy man who knows everything, or holy person who knows everything? Simple. In a word, Urkel. Way back in the late 80s and early 90s, there was a television show featuring a kid, a scrawny little kid with a heart of gold and a sharp mind, but he sure was klutzy. And he kept bumping into things and knocking things over. And after he created all this chaos, he'd say, "Did I do that?" He didn't say it, he'd ask it. But anyway, you get the idea. There are so many things going on in our central nervous system. It's kind of like an overcrowded elevator. But here's the good news. There's a simple solution. When we silently, mentally, and passively recite the demonstrative pronoun "this" during our inhalation, this big old brain, this big old clown car, begins to cooperate with our sympathetic nervous system. But wait, there's more. When we silently, mentally, and passively recite the one-syllable verb "ease" during our exhalation, this Borg circus begins to cooperate with our parasympathetic nervous system. And so through the magic of coordinating words with breath, we unleash effortless mindfulness and meditation. Mindfulness and meditation is older than religion. It is older than Taoism, it is older than Buddhism, it is older than Hinduism, it is older than Islam, it is older than Christianity, it is older than Judaism, it is older than shamanism. In every healthy human, there's an inner ear on each side of the head. And in those inner ears, there are teeny tiny little channels, tubes, lined with hairs and fluid. And those little tubes help us to automatically sit upright. Yeah, I've never walked in the street and see someone walking diagonally unless they had a horrible back pain. But I've never seen a healthy person walk diagonally down the street, because we have these wonderful mechanisms that help us to effortlessly walk upright. Similarly, if you watch children, maybe toddlers, maybe tweens, occasionally they'll just sit down. And maybe they'll enjoy this a patch of sunlight on the carpet, like a cat will. We are already wired to use these mechanisms, but for cultural reasons, we have forgotten to do it. Just as a child can sit effortlessly cross-legged, but most adults have difficulty doing that, we can do this. This is part of our evolutionary inheritance. We can notice, we can perceive, we can release, and these two as a team can guide the supercomputer of our brain. In the early 2000s, there was a movie starring Robert De Niro. I think the name of the movie was 15 Minutes. In the movie, the protagonist advises his protege with the words, "You cannot come back to a problem unless first you walk away from it." It sounds like you've given a lot of thought to various ideas and sects and subsects within the religion wherein you were raised. Now that you have the data, you can step back and plug in the supercomputer. Now, I am not omniscient. I don't know everything about Islam, but I was taught that Islam translates into submission. And submission is completely different. Let's go back over here. When we can be controlling, or we can be laid back. Laid back is another word for surrender. Sometimes God, however you call him or her, however you describe him or her, is thunderous. Sometimes is very quiet. A wonderful fringe benefit of training in harmony with our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems is we become less hateful and more loving. This thing I'm circling, this thing that kind of looks like a baseball mitt or a catcher's mitt, is known as the anterior cingulate gyrus. It functions as the hub of our mirror neurons, the seat of empathy and cooperation and love. The litmus test of meditation is, are we becoming more flexible, more loving, more laid back? Not are we pantomiming love, but is it the highest love? And the holy men of each tradition around the world, the wisest luminaries of each tradition around the world agree that the highest love is spontaneous and uncontrived. I am told, once again, I'm not an expert on Islam, but I was told that Muhammad considered Jesus to be a prophet. It is written that Jesus taught the kingdom of God is within. One of his acolytes wrote, "Perfect love drives out fear." When I was a child, I found a seesaw in a playground. And on the seesaw, it's just, a fulcrum and a board. And you can stand on you stand on one end, the other end goes up. You stand on the other end goes up. And if you have two people on it, you can go up and down. But you can't both go up at the same time. It has to be, it's alternating. Similarly, there is a inverse relationship between our amygdala and our anterior cingulate gyrus, between our seat of fear and aggression and between our seat of empathy, compassion, and love. If God is love and the kingdom of heaven is within, then the question is, to whom are we submitting? Are we submitting to fear and aggression, or are we submitting to empathy and love? We can choose empathy and love, but I can choose not to burn my finger, but if I don't take it off the stove, all that choosing isn't going to help. The easiest way to be defined by love is to use the mechanisms we were born with. Some people forget they have an entire central nervous system and they only focus on this little bit right here and this little bit right here. But we have a whole big central nervous system. You know, Allah has a sense of humor and he likes patterns. And if you look in nature, you will see many, 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 many patterns. And our central nervous system, doesn't it look a little bit like a tadpole? I think that's funny. I think you can hear Allah say, oh, sure, you make rockets and you make smartphones, but the center of your being looks like a tadpole. It's really tough to feel arrogant when we look like a baby frog. So that is that. And if you play with this and ease for as little as 5 minutes every 12 hours or so, you could get great results. After 1 week of practicing 5 minutes twice a day, you may feel like practicing for 10 minutes twice a day. That's fine. By the third week, you might feel like practicing for 15 minutes. By the fourth week, by 20 minutes. You don't have to. You may want to. If it feels like an arduous thing, back off. If it feels delightful and pleasurable, then do it. A wise man once said, follow your bliss. So think of it this way. Let's pretend there's two extremes and a happy medium. One extreme is that we are slaves to should. I should do this. I should do that. The other extreme is what I would call scattered spontaneity. You know, maybe you've had 3 espressos within 20 minutes and you're vibrating with interesting ideas. And the middle point between those two extremes is not scattered spontaneity, but centered spontaneity. Your greatest, the more that we meditate, the more that our choices and our utterances and our deeds will flow with the effortless effort of love's centered spontaneity. And perhaps while you're journaling, or perhaps while you're going for a walk, you will have insights. And some of those insights, and you can play with those insights like a child with a new toy. And some of those insights are immediately helpful. Some of those insights are not helpful at first, but maybe in the future they will. Some of those insights aren't helpful at all. But like a child in a room full of toys they've never experienced before, we can be curious and centered and spontaneous and play. In the Hebrew scriptures, it is written, we are created fearfully and wonderfully. We have so many wonderful mechanisms in our prefrontal cortex that can help us to be absolute luminaries. So this concludes the lesson. What I'd like to do next is practice. And if you wish to practice with me, you're welcome to. Now, part of the practices contains loving intentions and metaphors. Now, those metaphors are Buddhist, and so they're completely optional. And I'm warning you ahead of time because I don't want you to feel like I'm trying to deceive you or something. So metaphors are flexible, and you can change the metaphors however you want. And so we could start practicing together after approximately 30 seconds of housekeeping. This is Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School for more than 30 years. I spent about 8 hours a day, almost every day, studying, practicing, mastering, and reverse engineering each sect of meditation so that you won't have to. Welcome, my friends, to Meditate Like a Jedi, which is made possible due to the generosity of viewers just like you. So tonight I thought it could be fun to play with a practice text I've titled Secular Contemplation, Mindfulness, and Meditation. It's based on two ancient texts, the Metta Sutta and the Anapanasati Sutta. These are not devotional texts. These are simply texts on technique. So we're going to, during the Olympics, the runners don't just roll out of bed and wander to the track. They warm up first. And so we're going to warm up by using 4 chants to set our intention. So we're going to use figurative speech. If you feel comfortable, please chant with me. May all circumstances of all beings appearing yet impermanent be as safe and abundant as a real or imagined Buddha's land. So, this is not a prayer to a real or imagined entity. We're simply using words to guide our intention. May all minds of all beings clear yet impermanent be as joyfully enlightened as a real or imagined Buddha's mind. May all relationships of all beings resounding yet impermanent be as peacefully loving as a real or imagined Buddha's speech. May all bodies of all beings sensual yet impermanent be as beautifully healthy as a real or imagined Buddha's form. So our practice is divided into 4. We're going to begin with Dhammasati, or Dhammasati's set of 4 impermanence contemplations to help us circumstantially let go. We begin with the first of 4 passive contemplations, where we invigoratingly consider course impermanence. And we're going to do it passively. Here's how we do it. During the inhalation, we silently and mentally recite the preposition what. And during the exhalation, we silently and mentally recite the verb change. We continue with the second of four passive contemplations where we consider subtle impermanence. We're just replacing the verb change with the verb fade. We come to the third of four passive contemplations, where we can see the word passive. Yes, there we go. Where we consider very subtle impermanence, and we just replace the verb fade with the verb cease. We come to the fourth of four passive contemplations, where we consider relinquishing, surrendering, and letting go. We use the exercise we explored during the opening lesson. This is whatever comes up spontaneously, randomly, fleetingly. We now turn to our second quarter, where we continue with Kaya Sati's only set of 4 preliminary meditations that center our bodies. This cat looks very centered right now. We begin with the first of Centering's 4 physical preliminary practices, where we mindfully notice and even investigate our relaxingly longer, gentle respirations. So mindfulness is the first of 7 enlightenment factors. During our inhalation, we silently and mentally recite the verb watch. And during our exhalation, we silently and mentally recite the adjective long. Now, it's not our job to actively control our breath. We're just coordinating the silent and mental recitation with our breathing. That's it. We come to the second of Centering's 4 physical preliminary practices, where we mindfully notice and even investigate the coalescence of our shorter, invigorating respirations. This invigoration or energy is described as the third enlightenment factor. As we breathe in, we can silently and mentally recite the verb here. As we exhale, we can silently and mentally recite the adjective short. We come to the third of centerings for physical preliminary practices where we allow our minds to mindfully notice and even investigate our bodies. So investigation is not active but passive. What does that mean? It means when we notice things because of mindfulness, we choose not to be controlled by our defensiveness. We might feel defensive, and that's okay. But we choose to maintain vulnerability, even in the face of grotesqueries. As we breathe in, we can persist in silently and mentally reciting the verb here. As we exhale, we can silently and mentally recite the noun form, which is a synonym for body. We come to the fourth of centerings for physical preliminary practices, where we allow our bodies to tranquilly relax. During our inhalation, we silently and mentally recite the noun form. During our exhalation, we return to the verb ease. Welcome to this evening's live stream. The moment you have a specific question about meditation or contemplation or philosophy or their application, please type your question in great detail in the chat window. Having arrived at the halfway point, we continue with Vedana Sati's set of 4 jhana meditations that center our feelings. By the way, isn't this a great photograph? As we breathe in, we silently and mentally, well, let me just start from the top. We begin with the first of 4 feeling-oriented centering practices, where we savor the first jhana's invigorating, blissful joy, which is the 4th fold of the Buddha's, the 4th enlightenment factor, that flows from gently grinning with the corners of our mouth, the apples of our cheek, and the crow's feet of our eyes, towards our bodies of flesh, blood, and bone. All we got to do is play with words, silently, mentally, and passively. During our inhalation, we can silently and mentally recite the verb grin. And during our exhalation, we can silently and mentally recite the noun form. Form, of course, is a synonym for body. We continue with the second of 4 feeling-oriented centering practices, where we savor the second jhana's peaceful joy, which of course is a reference to the fourth enlightenment factor. We savor the second jhana's peaceful joy that flows from gently grinning, once again with the corners of our mouth, the apples of our cheeks, the crow's feet of our eyes, towards our thoughts. And we're using thought as an umbrella term to describe our emoting, intending, reasoning, recalling, and imagining. Again, with the inhalation, we silently and mentally recite the verb grin. During the exhalation, we silently and mentally recite the noun, the umbrella term, thoughts. We continue with the third of four feeling-oriented centering practices where we savor the third jhana's contentment. And I'll tell you, in late-stage capitalism, any form of contentment is a welcome surprise. We do so by mindfully noticing, investigating, and coalescing. Coalescing is, of course, the sixth enlightenment factor. Every time we breathe in, our air coalesces in our lungs. Every time we notice something, objects are coalescing within our awareness. By mindfully noticing, investigating, and coalescing our thoughts, emoting, intending, reasoning, recalling, and imagining. Watch thoughts. During the inhalation, we silently and mentally recite the verb watch. During the exhalation, we silently and mentally recite the noun thoughts. And of course, the verb is figurative. We continue with the fourth of four feeling-oriented centering practices, where we savor the fourth jhana's neutrality by allowing our thoughts, emoting, intending, reasoning, recalling, and imagining to tranquilly relax. During the inhalation, silently, mentally, and passively, we recite the noun thoughts. During the exhalation, we recite the verb ease. And ease is not an affirmation. We're not believing or willing our thoughts to ease, because we're simply describing what's already occurring thanks to our parasympathetic nervous system. We conclude with Chitta Sati's second set of 4 jhana meditations that center our mind. Beginning with the first of 4 mind-oriented centering practices, where we savor the 5th jhana's metaphoric sphere of infinite spaciousness. By mindfully noticing, investigating, and coalescing our mind's ability to smell, taste, feel, hear, see, and the like. And again, we're using mind as an umbrella term. During our inhalation, we could silently and mentally recite the verb watch, and during the exhalation, the noun mind. We continue with the sixth of 4 mind-oriented centering practices, where we savor the sixth jhana's metaphoric sphere of infinite awareness, which we generate by allowing our mind to invigoratingly gladden as towards it we gently smile. During our inhalation, we silently and mentally recite the verb grin. During our exhalation, we silently and mentally recite the noun mind. Now we come to the third of 4 mind-oriented centering practices, where we savor the 7th jhana's metaphoric sphere of non-graspability, as we allow our minds, smelling, tasting, feeling, hearing, seeing, and the like, to tranquilly relax in the most sustainable way. During our inhalation, we can silently and mentally recite the noun mind. During the exhalation, we can silently and mentally recite the verb ease. We come now to the fourth of four mind-oriented centering practices, where we sever the eighth jhana's metaphoric sphere of aqueous non-labeling. By experiencing the liberating equanimity of our controlling tendencies to push and pull and remedy and cultivate. During our inhalations, silently, mentally, and passively, we could recite the umbrella term mind, which refers in this context to our capacity to smell and taste and feel and hear and see and the like. During our exhalation, we can silently, mentally, and passively recite the verb free. Now, we're not, this is not an affirmation. We're not trying to contrive anything. We are already wired, thanks to our parasympathetic nervous system, to release during our exhalation. Why then mention it? To align our mind with our factory installed wiring. Let us continue by passively contemplating, relinquishing, surrendering, and letting go. Let's seal this practice by chanting love and releases wishes for universal enlightenment and well-being. May all circumstances of all beings appearing yet impermanent be as safe and abundant as a real or imagined Buddha's land. May all minds of all beings clear yet impermanent be as joyfully enlightened as a real or imagined Buddha's mind. May all relationships of all beings resounding yet impermanent be as peacefully loving as a real or imagined Buddha's speech. May all bodies of all beings sensual yet impermanent be as beautifully healthy as a real or imagined Buddha's form. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. In approximately 10.5 hours, I would very much like to return to tomorrow's early meditation class and group practice. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.